This is ABC News Live.
The crush of families here in Poland.
At refugee centers
in Putin's Russia.
On the ground in Ukraine.
Close to the front line.
From the capital, destructive Cat 4 storm.
Here along I-5.
Boston is in the bullseye.
Let's go.
ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7, straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
With so much happening these days, it's hard to keep up.
Things change hour by hour, minute by minute.
The historic weather that's now unfolding.
The worries on Wall Street.
We're bringing you the Right Now. But a nationwide teacher shortage.
The Right Now look at the day ahead. An alert this morning for dog owners and the key takeaways from the biggest stories.
World News Now and America This Morning. America's #1 early morning news.
Today does feel a little different. Early mornings on ABC News Live.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. We begin tonight here in Buffalo, London, in Alaska, Uvalde, Kentucky, reporting in from Poland, Ukrainian refugees here in Warsaw. Do you think you'll ever be able to go back home? Did you ever have a conversation about an abortion? Is she lying?
Yes, she's lying.
Arguably the most controversial Supreme Court ruling in history. What's the impact on you now? Do you have future political aspirations?
Absolutely.
You ready for this?
Go!
He ran for Senate president, now running for governor. I take it you like to run. This is the calling card.
ABC News Live!
You're going to deliver a show that will be remembered forever.
The pressure on me.
Finish this sentence. I want young girls to know. I mean, you are just a tough, bad bleep.
And good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kira Phillips. Top headlines we're following for you on ABC News Live. Subway chokehold. Now the former Marine who killed Jordan Neely is released on bail. What charges he's facing as Neely's family calls for justice. Crisis at the border. Title 42 expires and migrant facilities are over capacity. Now a new ruling that could make things even worse. We are live from El Paso. And brutal storms slamming states across the country, at least 16 tornadoes. We've got the latest on the aftermath and where those storms are headed next. But we do begin with the latest on the deadly subway chokehold in New York City. The former Marine accused of killing Jordan Neely, appearing in a Manhattan courtroom and now officially charged with second-degree manslaughter. ABC News senior investigative reporter Aaron Katersky joining me live outside the Manhattan Criminal Courthouse there in New York. Aaron, he did not enter a plea.
Daniel Penny did not enter a plea. Kira, no plea was required from Daniel Penny at this stage after he was charged by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office with second-degree manslaughter in connection with the chokehold death of Jordan Neely aboard the northbound F train back on May 1st. The charge reflects a belief from prosecutors that although Penny did not intend to kill Neely, he did act recklessly. And just a moment ago, we received a statement from Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, who said that Jordan Neely should still be alive today. Bragg says, "My thoughts continue to be with his family and loved ones as they mourn his loss during this extremely painful time." And a short while ago, we heard from an attorney for the Neely family. Take a listen.
He is saying that he saw Jordan ball up his fist. And I just want to mention to you this. On May 1st, I'm sure the police questioned him. I'm sure that everybody read the statement that he and his attorneys put out. Was that anywhere in the statement? Was it anywhere? It was not. Daniel Penny is getting a chance to rewrite what happened in the subway that day as time goes by.
The attorney for the Neely family said the charge should actually be upgraded to perhaps second-degree murder against Daniel Penny, but for the moment it's second-degree manslaughter, and the case is now going to go before a grand jury as prosecutors work to secure an indictment in court. Penny stood ramrod straight before the judge, a posture reflecting his service in the U.S. Marine Corps. He had surrendered to the police earlier in a way that his attorney said befitted the dignity of his service in the U.S. Marine Corps. He was released on a $100,000 bond. And Kira, one more note here, that there were no spectators in court, but the case has drawn protests nearly every day since the incident happened, and prosecutors are well aware. They took pains to say in court, the assistant district attorney did, that they've conducted a thorough investigation that included reviewing video, talking to eyewitnesses, 911 callers, and responding police officers, with more investigative work to come. Kira?
A lot to follow. Aaron, thank you so much. And we do want to talk about this some more. We'll bring our legal contributor and host of the Law and Crime Network, Brian Buckmeyer, also former NYPD Chief of Detectives and ABC News contributor Bob Boyce. So, Bob, Daniel Penny was arraigned on a second-degree manslaughter charge. We just reported that. But initially, police questioned him and let him go. So what do you think changed?
Well, a lot changed since that time. Yeah, the ME report came in. At that point, you didn't know how this male died, so you had to wait for that. You also had time to look at and get a statement from him. Was the most important thing that you could have done. Put a timeline and tell how his feelings at the time. Was he threatened? That was done as well. As also go out and get video, support the case much more with evidence, and then call the DA, and they'll tell you not to make the arrest right then and there. I'm guaranteed that's what happened here.
So, Brian, Daniel Penny did not enter a plea today. As a former homicide public defender, what's the strategy here?
Less strategy and more just procedural posture. What that means is whenever you're arrested for a felony in New York, there are two arraignments, an initial arraignment and a felony arraignment. In the initial arraignment, you're simply just told your charges, and it's decided as to whether or not bail would be set, or bond in this sense. In the second or felony arraignment, that's when you're given an opportunity to plead guilty or not guilty, because you're given far more information. You're often given the indictment, any notices as to what statements may be used against you. So it's more procedural rather than strategy at this point.
So then, Brian, why bring these charges against him now? And then what about those other two passengers that actually assisted in restraining Neely?
Right. As Bob said, the more information as it came in, we're learning more and more about what happened to Jordan Neely. And so investigations, whether it be through medical reports or through eyewitness accounts or video, gives a greater understanding as to whether or not the threat posed by Jordan Neely to others, as they may have perceived it, rose to the level that self-defense or defense of others was needed. And so that's the reason why it took so long. In terms of going forward in the next steps, it's going to be discovery requests, more information, and seeing whether or not these allegations fit the charges.
So there is a statement now. Penny's attorneys released it, said that he risked his own life and safety for the good of his fellow passengers. The unfortunate result was the unintended and unforeseen death of Mr. Neely. They say that they believe that once the facts are revealed, he will be absolved of any wrongdoing. Now, passengers say that Neely appeared to be erratic but never physically touched anyone. So does the argument of self-defense still hold here? And clearly, it seems like we do need to hear more facts within this case.
Yeah, out of the initial step, I would say there appears to be some groundwork for a self-defense claim here, but more is needed. I would want to hear what the other observers in the subway car saw, what they heard, what these threats were, if there were at all. But I think ultimately it's going to come down to what Penny perceived in his mind. And the big question, at least in my mind, is after Jordan Neely passed out, why did you keep him in the chokehold? I think the use of force after that point, or even when multiple people were holding him down, as you brought up earlier, they could potentially face aiding and abetting charges, but I think it's unlikely because they participated, but not to the degree that, for example, you may have seen in the death of George Floyd or the Derek Chauvin case where other officers were also charged. I think it's unlikely, but possible, but we'll see how it continues.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the George Floyd situation and just that chokehold that he just never let go, knowing what was happening to George Floyd. So, Bob, there are now calls to address the homeless and mental health crisis, including from Jordan Neely's family and attorney. They spoke earlier today. Let's take a listen.
We thank everyone that's raised a sign, that's raised their voice, that made a post and said, mental illness has to be addressed. Houselessness has to be addressed. We have to take care of each other. We don't want anybody afraid on the subway. But We want people to look at those that may be there in that situation and say, why? And how can I help them?
And it's a good point, Bob. You know, and you began your career with the NYPD in 1983, making your way up to become chief of detectives. How do you think things have changed from the 80s to now, especially within the subway system in terms of violence and homelessness?
We saw some changes in the de Blasio administration of laxing the prosecution efforts on people in the subway. Turnstile jumping is no longer a criminal act, and different things, the quality of life issues down there as well, especially the mentally ill. At one point, they were, they had involuntary removal to a psychiatric, if they were in the middle of an episode, of course, to a psychiatric ward, and they were evaluated there. Often they'll let just left right just out after that, so there's no determined sign. This is such a gross failure. I don't often agree with defense attorneys, but it's such a gross failure of the city. He had 40 instances where they could have taken action, and they put him in different. He punched a woman, threw another woman up against the train. This is clearly action that should have been addressed and wasn't. They're right about that.
Right, and as we hear from family members too, you know, these type of people need love from their family and help from their family. Sometimes a lot of tough love, right, to make a difference and help them. Brian and Bob, thank you both so much. Now, that landmark change to the U.S. immigration system, a federal judge in Florida ordering the Biden administration to temporarily stop the quick release policy at migrant holding facilities. This comes just hours after Title 42 officially expired, and now thousands of migrants are trapped along the U.S.-Mexico border. Our Mireya Villarreal is in El Paso, Texas, and has the latest for us.
As Title 42 officially comes to an end, migrants amassing along the U.S. border with a surge of American authorities waiting on the other side.
We have a lot of different agencies here, as you can see. Plus, there's even more just on standby if needs be.
As of midnight, most asylum applications in the U.S. now require two things. Non-Mexican migrants must first apply for and be denied asylum in another country, and migrants will have to make an appointment on the CBP One app. If the rules aren't followed, migrants face deportation and are not allowed to enter the U.S. for at least 5 years. A federal judge temporarily blocking part of the White House's plan to address border crossings, barring federal agencies from releasing migrants before they've been given a notice to appear in court. George speaking with Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas earlier about the ruling.
What is your reaction to this ruling from a federal judge last night blocking you from releasing more migrants into the U.S. without an order to show up in court?
Georgia, we consider it a very harmful ruling. The practice of releasing individuals when our Border Patrol facilities, when our Border Patrol stations are overcrowded is something that each administration has done from administration to administration. This is a harmful ruling, and the Department of Justice is considering our options.
¿Cuántos días están aquí esperando? 4 days. This family with 4 children waiting to get processed near the border wall in El Paso for 4 days, one of the last groups to come through before new, steeper consequences set in. U.S. Border Patrol Chief Raul Ortiz confirming already there are 26,000 people in custody.
This is being felt all along the U.S.-Mexico border now. More than 800 miles southeast of El Paso, where Mireya is Brownsville. And our Will Carr is outside a migrant processing center, joins me now from there. So, Will, just basically set the scene of where you are. What's it like? Show and tell anything you can.
Kira, we're in downtown Brownsville, which for all intents and purposes has become a makeshift processing center. This is normally a busy road. In Brownsville, you can see it has been shut off. They have the fencing here. This is where the migrants who make it across, claim asylum, are being brought as they're going through the processing. I want to show you some people. They don't know what to do next. They're just in here in the stairwell. They're sleeping. They're sitting. As you come along, we've seen people up and down, wrapped all around this block. Many have those blue bags. That is their processing bag. That means they have been processed. That's filled with their paperwork, and now they're trying to figure out their next step. So I want to keep walking around showing you throughout here when we're talking to the people who are in these streets. And keep in mind, it is a very hot and muggy day. People have been sitting out here for days trying to figure out what they're going to do next. Many tell us that they have come fleeing violence. We just spoke with one woman who's from Ecuador. She flew to Mexico and then came across on Sunday. Now she is waiting to try to go see her family in New York. She tells me it was a terrifying experience trying to get here, and there's been so much confusion with the migrants. Some think or thought that they might have a better chance of getting in prior to Title 42 being lifted last night. Others thought that it would be easier to get in right now. Obviously, communication has not been great. The authorities have tried to set up that app that we've talked about so many times now, but that app is having problems. And when they get here, I want to show you exactly what they're trying to do. Everybody here is trying to get on one of those buses. Those buses could go all over the country. They're trying to reunite with family. Those who don't have family, they're trying to figure out where to go next. Kira.
Wow, it's complicated. So all right, then, Will, as we continue to touch base with you clearly throughout today, those that are there with their blue bags, process their paperwork, keep us updated on if they do find out where they're able to head to and where the buses are headed. We'd love to follow up, Will, as you're there in Brownsville for us. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Well, the end of Title 42 now being felt across the entire country. You can see with packed migrant facilities in the South, busloads of migrants are arriving in regions all across the United States. But some local leaders say that they just can't accommodate all the asylum seekers, and they've declared a state of emergency, including Orange County, New York now. And that's where we find our Jacqueline Lee. So, Jacqueline, the majority of these migrants have been, placed in New York City, but New York City Mayor Eric Adams has also been busing them to other suburbs, saying that his city has basically been destroyed by this crisis. So how is the community responding today?
Yeah, that's right, Kara. We just spoke with the Orange County Executive, Steve Newhouse, and he says he's very frustrated because no one told him last night that 82 migrants would be arriving here at this hotel. He says state police did not know, the local sheriff did not know. He says the governor did not know, and he says he's very upset that everyone is being kept in the dark. And he says ultimately the responsibility lies with the New York City Mayor Eric Adams. And he says that more responsibility needs to be taken and more teamwork needs to be done. So take a listen as to what he wants to see happen. What would you like to see happen?
I would like to see, honestly, it comes down to the president and the Congress. They need to come up with a plan. Now we're expecting a flood of more migrants because the order just expired last night. So I'd like to see a plan on a national level. And then on the city, state, what I think should really happen, the mayor, the governor, and all the county executives need to be on one call, even if it takes 2 or 3 hours, and hash this out. Because I've gotten calls from counties that said, I'll take people.
And he says he is very concerned that none of the people who arrived last night are vetted. He said if he knew their names, if he knew if they were being sponsored by families or if they had a sort of job lined up, that this would be a more palatable situation. But he says that is the #1 concern, is that Orange County is ultimately left in the dark about all these people that are now arriving. He also says that because of how hyper-politicized this issue is, protesters have arrived at this hotel in the past. And he says given how strongly people feel on whatever side that they are on, he is worried that something very dangerous could break out. Kira.
Right, I'm just curious how those there at the hotel are reacting, if you've been able to talk to anybody inside, and how long we can expect, these migrants to be staying at the hotel, and then where do they go next?
Well, so far, we haven't been able to speak with anyone at the hotel. No one has entered or exited since we've been here. But in terms of how long these migrants could be here, we are told up to 4 months. But Mr. Newhouse said that he's not sure. He says migrants could arrive tonight. They could leave later. There's a lot of litigation going on. So everything is really just up in the air. But he also said that New York law says that you can't stay at a hotel past 30 days, and that could also play a factor. But when it comes to these migrants, the New York City mayor said that they would pay for these migrants to be here for 4 months, and that would be handled by the city. So ultimately, here in Orange County, it seems like everyone is in the dark. Kira.
Okay, we'll stay in touch. Jacqueline Lee there in Orange County, New York for us. Thank you so much. And coming up, 16 reported tornadoes touching down across the country now. We are in the storm zone right after this.
much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any other newscast. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast across all of television. Right now in America, with so much at stake, thank you for making ABC's This Week America's #1 news and politics show on Sunday mornings.
You never know what you're going to get on this show. That's all I'm going to tell you.
Yes, Whoopi! Is this mic on? Can you hear me out there?
Behind the scenes is always a better show.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's what people don't see during the commercial break.
Right, they don't.
What happened?
I had no idea really what I was getting myself into.
That day that we walked out, I treasured that day. I couldn't sit there.
You're doing good, Joy. You're doing good.
Oh, yeah, baby. It was crazy.
Behind the Table. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
From America's #1 news source comes the all-new ABC News app. Breaking news, incredible video, faster, smarter, and it can customize to you and your interests. If you love being in the know, you're gonna love this. Experience what all the buzz is about. Experience the all-new ABC News app. Download it now. We're honored ABC's 2020 winner of 3 Emmy Awards for excellence. Thank you for making 2020 Friday night's most watched and most honored news magazine. This is where the newsmakers come first in the morning to be heard. America's #1 morning show.
How would your mom feel about your relationship with your brother now?
I can't imagine what it feels like to go from $20 billion to $100,000.
Yeah.
Are you worried about going to jail?
You write that you had low-grade depression. How'd you get out of that?
Wherever the story, ABC's Good Morning America is right there.
With so much happening these days, it's hard to keep up.
Things change hour by hour, minute by minute.
The historic weather that's now unfolding.
The worries on Wall Street.
We're bringing you the Right Now. Been a nationwide teacher shortage.
The Right Now look at the day ahead. An alert this morning for dog owners and the key takeaways from the biggest stories.
World News Now and America This Morning, America's #1 early morning news.
Today does feel a little different. Early mornings on ABC News Live.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. We begin tonight here in Buffalo, London, in Alaska. Uvalde, Kentucky, from Poland, Ukrainian refugees here in Warsaw. Did you ever have a conversation about an abortion? Is she lying? Do you have a political aspiration?
Absolutely.
You ready for this? Go! You're going to deliver a show that will be remembered forever.
Ooh, the pressure on me.
You are just a tough, bad
From America's #1 news source comes the all-new ABC News app. Breaking news, incredible video, faster, smarter, and it can customize to you and your interests. If you love being in the know, you're gonna love this. Experience what all the buzz is about. Experience the all-new ABC News app. Download it now. You're watching America's #1 streaming news. Live reporting, breaking new exclusives. Keep streaming with ABC News Live.
So at least 16 tornadoes were reported in 5 states yesterday, in Louisiana, Colorado, Kansas, Nebraska, and Oklahoma. And now more severe weather is expected across the heartland. Our senior meteorologist, Rob Marciano, is in Noble, Oklahoma.
Tornadoes tearing across the plains. This twister moving through a field in Weston, Kansas.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness.
And this tornado in Cole, Oklahoma, shredding roofs off homes.
Oh, it just hit something.
Oh, no.
Oh, a house.
Oh, whole house
just got lofted.
Up to 15 reported tornadoes touching down across the central U.S. You can see this one forming over a field in Norman, kicking up debris. But the worst damage suffered in the city of Noble, about 30 miles south of Oklahoma City. We were there right after the twister tore through town.
We're just coming up on Noble, Oklahoma. This town got hit by a tornado. You see first responders on the scene here. Significant damage to some of the businesses here, and that home really torn up.
Rescue teams on the ground just minutes after the tornado struck.
Got multiple agencies in trying to give us a hand to assess the damage.
Multiple buildings suffering significant damage. And the owner of this house that was damaged said he and his family survived by sheltering in a closet. And about an hour after this tornado struck, another tornado-warned storm hit the area with pea-sized hail.
Of course, we're so happy to find out that that family did survive relatively unscathed. The home is behind me. Obviously, at least half of it is unlivable. They did sleep in that house last night, and they came out earlier this morning. A long road ahead for them and the donut shop next door. This is really an institution in the town of Noble. That's going to be out of business at least for a little while before insurance can come in and fix things up. And of course, utility crews here, they've been hard at work all night and through the morning trying to restore power back to at least the facility, the structures, and the homes that can accept that power. Sun is out now, not necessarily good news because we are still in the threat for seeing severe weather today, and this will only add fuel to that fire. A big stretch of the central U.S. is in it. Let's take a look at that convective outlook from the Rio Grande Valley of Texas and Mexico right up through I-35 and Oklahoma City. We'll probably see some action again tonight and up the Missouri River through Kansas City, Omaha. I think that area where there's a bit more of a bullseye, we'll see a greater likelihood of some big damaging hail and maybe a stronger likelihood of seeing a tornado like this one carrying into the overnight hours. And then tomorrow we have a little more concentrated threat, but nonetheless pretty significant a little bit farther east. Kira?
All right, Rob, thanks so much. And coming up, there's a new chief twit in charge who Elon Musk is hiring to run Twitter and why he calls himself that next.
You never know what you're going to get on this show. That's all I'm going to tell you.
Yes, Whoopi! Is this mic on? Can you hear me out there?
Behind the scenes is always a better show.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That's what people don't see during the commercial break.
Right, they don't.
What happened?
I had no idea really what I was getting myself into.
That day that we walked out, I treasure that day. I couldn't sit there.
You're doing good, Joy. You're doing good. Oh, yeah, baby.
It was crazy.
Behind the Table. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
This is where the newsmakers come first in the morning to be heard. America's #1 morning show.
How would your mom feel about your relationship with your brother now?
I can't imagine what it feels like to go from $20 billion to $100,000.
Yeah.
Are you worried about going to jail?
You write that you had low-grade depression. How'd you get out of that?
Wherever the story, ABC's Good Morning America is right there.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it.
Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you?
How cute.
Yeah.
So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do?
Hey, I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 2 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any other newscast. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast across all of television.
With so much at stake in our world right now, we wanted to thank you for your trust and for making ABC News America's #1 news.
And thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
You're watching America's #1 streaming news, ABC News Live. Breaking news, exclusives, live reporting across the globe. Keep streaming with ABC News Live.
Reporting from the scene of that deadly missile strike in Dnipro, Ukraine, I'm Matt Gutman. Wherever the story is, we'll take you there. You're streaming ABC News Live.
And thanks for streaming with us. Well, some other headlines that we're following for you this hour. A jury now deliberating the fate of Lori Vallow, the Idaho mom accused of killing her 2 youngest children in 2019. Prosecutors say she did it as part of a doomsday cult scheme, but her lawyers say she's a good mom. But something changed when she met her current husband. She faces up to life in prison if found guilty. Twitter has a new CEO, Elon Musk, announcing today that Linda Yaccarino, former NBC Universal advertising chief, will take on the role. Musk tweeting that Yaccarino will focus primarily on business operations while he focuses on product design and technology. Yaccarino will start with the tech company in 6 weeks. And pasta costing a pretty penne in Italy, and it might make an al dente in your wallet. Prices have jumped so much that the government is holding an emergency meeting now. Italians paying about 20% more for the staple than last year, double the country's inflation rate for other goods. The prices boiling over, even though wheat prices have actually fallen this year. We'll let you gnocchi when there are more developments. I'm Kira Phillips. Thanks for streaming with us and surviving the puns. You can always find us on Hulu, Roku, the ABC News app, and of course on abcnews.com. The news never stops, and neither do we. We'll be right back.
This is ABC News Live.
The crush of families here in Poland.
At refugee centers
In Putin's Russia.
On the ground in Ukraine.
Close to the front line.
From the capital, destructive Cat 4 storm.
You're along I-5.
Boston is in the bullseye.
Let's go.
ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news. Anytime, anywhere. Streaming 24/7, straight to you for free.
Thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any other newscast. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast across all of television. Right now in America, with so much at stake, thank you for making ABC's This Week America's #1 news and politics show on Sunday mornings. This is where the newsmakers come first in the morning to be heard. America's #1 morning show.
How would your mom feel about your relationship with your brother now?
I can't imagine what it feels like to go from $20 billion to $100,000.
Yeah.
Are you worried about going to jail?
You write that you had low-grade depression. How'd you get out of that?
Wherever the story, ABC's Good Morning America is right there. From America's #1 news source comes the all-new ABC News app. Breaking news, incredible video, faster, smarter, and it can customize to you and your interests. If you love being in the know, you're gonna love this. Experience what all the buzz is about. Experience the all-new ABC News app. Download it now.
Reporting from LaGuardia Airport, I'm Gio Benitez. Wherever the story is, we'll take you there. You're streaming ABC News Live.
And hello, everyone. So glad you're streaming with us on this Friday. I'm Kira Phillips.
And I'm Terry Moran. And today on ABC News Live, breaking news right now. A verdict has been reached in the trial of Lori Vallow Daybell, accused of murdering her 2 youngest sons back in 2019. We're going to bring it to you live as soon as it happens, which will be very soon.
Subway chokehold. Now the former Marine who killed Jordan Neely is released on bail. What charges he's facing as Neely's family calls for justice.
And crisis at the border. Title 42 has expired, and migrant facilities are already over capacity. Now, a new ruling from a judge could make things even worse. We're live at the border with the latest.
And we begin with that landmark change to the U.S. immigration system. A federal judge in Florida ordering the Biden administration to temporarily stop the quick release policy at migrant holding facilities. This comes just hours after Title 42 officially expired.
That policy described by the administration as a parole, and thousands of migrants, as you can see, are trapped now along the U.S.-Mexico border. ABC News' Morgan Norwood is in El Paso and joins us now with more. So, Morgan, El Paso issued a state of emergency, I guess, days before Title 42 was even lifted. How are things looking there now?
Well, Terry, this is the U.S.-Mexico border right behind me, where we've seen a steady stream of migrants being bussed out. Officials here on the ground tell me that close to 1,000 migrants were processed overnight, and that is at various points along the border, right? And so when we arrived today, there were a few hundred waiting to get into the gates. That's men, women, and even children. And so, yeah, that is the situation here, but certainly not the surge that officials were even predicting here. But what has sort of changed? There is this particular uncertainty, right, with the people that have already been processed here, just trying to figure out what the next steps are in terms of where they go next and how they get around and navigate this situation. Terry?
Morgan, we will follow that story clearly, but we want to get to some breaking news. We've just learned a verdict has been reached in the trial of Lori Vallow Daybell, that Idaho mom accused of killing her 2 youngest children and her husband's previous wife in what's been described as that doomsday plot.
So this verdict comes after a 5-week trial. There's been 5 weeks of testimony here, during which prosecutors argued that the couple believed that their children were zombies and murdered them. If convicted, Lori Vallow Daybell faces up to life in prison without parole. The jury's set to read that verdict now in that courtroom. Let's listen in.
Jury's all present, Your Honor. All right, thank you, Mr. Bailiff. Please be seated. All right, the court will note that we had alternate jurors that were excused upon deliberations, so now the remaining 12 jurors who have deliberated are here and appear to all be properly seated. Will counsel stipulate that the jury is all present and properly seated from the state?
Yes, Your Honor.
Will the defense will stipulate?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, at this time, the court will inquire then from the jury. Has the jury reached a verdict? Yeah. Very well. If you have the verdict form, I'd ask the bailiff bring that over here and we'll have it brought to the clerk to be read. All right, the court has reviewed the verdict form, find that it's been properly completed, signed and dated. So at this time, I'll direct the clerk to please read the verdict into the record. The defendant would please rise.
In the District Court of the 7th Judicial District of the State of Idaho, in and for the County of Fremont, State of Idaho plaintiff versus Lori Noreen Vallow, aka Lori Noreen Daybell, defendant, case number CR 22211624. Verdict. We, the jury, duly impaneled and sworn to try the above entitled action for our verdict, unanimously answer the questions submitted to us as follows. Question number 1. In regards to count 1 of the amended indictment, is Lori Noreen Vallow not guilty or guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Tylee Bryan and grand theft by deception? Answer, guilty. Question number 2. In regards to count 2 of the amended indictment, is Lori Noreen Vallow not guilty or guilty of first-degree murder of Tylee Bryan? Answer, guilty. Question number 3. In regards to count 3 of the amended indictment, is Lori Noreen Vallow not guilty or guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Joshua Jackson Vallow and grand theft by deception? Answer, guilty. Question number 4. In regards to count 4, the amended indictment, is Lori Noreen Vallow not guilty or guilty of first-degree murder of Joshua Jackson Vallow? Answer, guilty. Question number 5. In regards to count 5 of the amended indictment, is Lori Noreen Vallow not guilty or guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Tammy Daybell? Answer, guilty. Question number 6. In regards to count 7 of the amended indictment, is Lori Noreen Vallow not guilty or guilty of grand theft? Answer, guilty. Dated this 12th day of May, 2023, signed by the presiding officer.
All right, please be seated. Madam Clerk, thank you for reading the verdict into the record. At this time, let me just inquire of the jury, is this in fact your true and correct verdict?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Let me ask now from counsel, does the state wish to have the jury polled?
We do not, Your Honor.
Does the defense wish to have the jury polled?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, the jury will be polled at this time. Madam Clerk, if you would please indicate only by juror numbers of each of the jurors if this is their true and correct verdict individually.
Juror number 4, is this your true and correct verdict?
Yes, it is.
Juror number 5, is this your true and correct verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 6, is this your true and correct verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 8, is this your true and correct verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 9, is this your true and correct verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 10, is this your true and correct verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 11, is this your true and correct verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 12, is this your true and correct verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 13, is this your true and correct verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 14, is this your true and correct verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 15, is this your true and correct verdict?
Yes.
Juror number 16, is this your true and correct verdict?
Yes.
All right, thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. The court does find it's a unanimous verdict in this case, so I will direct the clerk to record the verdict into the record of this case. I'll now have a closing jury instruction for our jurors and also those alternate jurors that are in attendance today. You have now completed your duties as jurors in this case and are discharged with the sincere thanks of this court. The question may arise as to whether you may discuss this case with the attorneys or with anyone else. For your guidance, the court instructs you that whether you talk to the attorneys or to anyone else is entirely your own decision. It is proper for you to discuss this case if you want to, but you are not required to do so, and you may choose not to discuss the case with anyone at all. If you choose to talk to someone about the case, you may tell them as much or little as you like about your deliberations or the facts that influenced your decision. If you decide to discuss the case with anyone, you should be careful to respect the privacy and feelings of your fellow jurors. You should limit your comments to your own perceptions and feelings. If anyone persists in discussing the case over your objections or becomes critical of your service either before or after any discussion has begun, please report that to me. At this time, then, the court offers its sincere thanks to the jurors. I appreciate your patience and attentiveness throughout this lengthy trial. I also thank you again for upholding your important civic duty as jurors in this case. I'd also like to thank the attorneys who tried this case for your professionalism throughout the proceedings and in the pretrial motions that came before trial. At this time, then, the court will discuss briefly sentencing in this case. In Idaho, pursuant to Title 19, Chapter 25, a report is required to be prepared before sentencing called a pre-sentence investigation report. In a typical case, that report takes at least 2 months to prepare. In a case such as this, it will likely take longer. The court will inquire as to a pre-sentence investigator for the time frame required to prepare the report in this case. Upon getting an estimation, then the court will reach out to counsel for determining a date for sentencing. I'll just advise everyone that will likely be, I'm thinking, at least 3 months probably before that sentencing can be scheduled to have the report completed. The court will also advise at this time then, upon conclusion of the proceedings, the defendant will be remanded back to custody of the Ada County Sheriff at this time to be transferred to the Fremont County Sheriff for further proceedings in Fremont County for sentencing. The court will also instruct the clerk to collect any of the jurors' notes pursuant to Idaho Criminal Rule 24.1A. At this time, then, the court will ask that the jurors and any alternates in attendance be excused from the courtroom, and I am going to direct that all in attendance here remain seated until such time as the jurors have been completely exited from the courtroom. And in addition, I'll let the jurors know there is additional information you'll be receiving through the court administration offices on your way out as you leave today. So again, thank you for your service. Court will be adjourned. And Mr. Bailiff, if you could have all rise for the jury.
All rise, please.
Thank you, counsel. Thank you, everyone, for your decorum this afternoon. Court is adjourned.
Judge, would like you to open the doors for me.
So let's bring in ABC's Ike Ejiochi and Brian Buckmeyer, ABC News contributor and defense attorney. After this verdict, guilty on all counts. And let me ask, Ike, what do you make of this verdict? Is this a surprise?
Well, what we saw here is essentially a blow to lose the death penalty. And that's because the state failed to meet the filing deadline for discovery. But nevertheless, the next thing will be sentencing. And the judge has said that Lori's sentencing won't be until at least 3 months from now. And as of now, based on the charges she was found guilty of, she will face a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. Now, as for Chad Daybell, it was decided prior to the trial that both defendants will, in fact, be tried separately. Now, his case isn't expected until possibly June of next year, where he's also facing murder, conspiracy, and grand theft charges for J.J. Vallow and Tylee Ryan. Now, he's also facing charges for his former wife's death. Kira.
So Ike and Brian, maybe let's take it to you. Let's just give a little background here. This has been a 5-week trial and so many twists and turns within this family, the background of this religious cult that they were involved with. Let's just, for those that haven't been following the trial, Brian, why do you think this became, I guess, such a salacious story across the country? It really does have, I mean, you have children, innocent children that were killed. You have a couple with numerous affairs. This woman charged, now with the killing of her 2 kids. This was her 5th marriage. She had some sort of relationship as they got involved with this religious group. Just give us a little texture to why we are talking about this, Brian.
I think it was really the way that we learned about this story. At first, it started off with 2 missing children. And of course, that is going to be a massive story in of itself. But as we dug a little bit deeper and learned about the Daybells, both Chad and Lori, there were more layers to it that really just made your jaw drop. I mean, you listed some of them. This doomsday belief that some of these children were demons or had spirits in them that need to be casted out. And then we started to learn about why these children were missing, as we first believed them to be. Chad and Lori were off in Hawaii, just enjoying their newfound marriage. Then we heard about Chad's ex-wife, who had died what we thought naturally, but then her body gets exhumed, and now she's part of one of the guilty convictions against Lori Vallow Daybell. It just become one story after a next. I think independently would have been a huge story in of itself, but combined all together, you got doomsday cult, missing children, divorces, exes that are murdered, and now Chad's got another trial coming up, and even Alex Cox, a brother who died and was supposed to be a part of this all. Every way you looked at this case, it was jaw-dropping and shocking.
And Brian, if I can follow up on this, on the religious angle, they believed in end times and demons, and there's ancient traditions in the Christian faith of people who believe that don't kill their kids, obviously. So their beliefs. If the prosecution is correct, and the jury has affirmed the prosecution's case here volubly, but I just wonder if there's a potential issue on appeal. How often do you see prosecutors say, because they believed these religious beliefs, we can encourage you to find them guilty because it was part of their way of looking at the world and the way of looking at their kids. Now, I understand the evidence, I guess, was strong in this regard, but, we are very jealous of our religious freedom in this country.
Yeah. Sorry, that was for Ike. Yeah, it's not a tactic that is typically used. Like you said, we are very protective of religious freedoms in the United States. But I think because of the way that it was woven into this case, Chad Daybell being a person who had written about his unique religious beliefs and the zombies and the demons and the spirits within people that needed to be casted out, I think it made sense when the prosecution came out and said this is about sex, power, and money. And it worked well because of the text messages, the conversations, even some of the family members who knew Lori Vallow Daybell prior to being with Chad and said, this was not on our radar. She was, for all intents and purposes, a very good mother. But when she met Chad, her belief system and her way that she operated as a mother changed drastically. And I think interjecting this religious aspect was necessary to this case to help people understand the impetus and motive behind the murders, the money, and this new lifestyle that they chose.
And Ike, now you've got Lori's husband, Chad Daybell, right? He's also, of course, charged in the children's death here. His trial expected to start this summer. So what do we think? Could the outcome, could we see the similar outcome? Of course, Lori's trial, I'm sure, will impact this as well.
Well, essentially before this, what they had to do was separate this. We saw that essentially it was decided beforehand that they tried to tell the jury to not try to lump this together. These are separate cases, and it was something that they essentially wanted to just focus on Lori on this one, and then obviously focus on Chad the next. But it's going to be difficult to separate that, obviously, because this was a scheme that included both of these individuals. Now, the instructions for what the jury had to follow, essentially what the state has to prove, it's likely that it'll be similar for both cases. And in this case, we knew that the jury, they were essentially tasked with deciding if Lori and Chad did in fact endorse and advocate religious beliefs just for the purpose of trying to justifying the homicide of J.J. Vallow. Now, we also know that the jury had to decide if Lori Vallow tried to cover up the crime by providing a misleading physical location of J.J. Vallow to investigators when they started that lawful investigation. We also know that the jury has to decide if Lori Vallow either refused to or failed to contact the Social Security Administration. We know that by law, they have to inform them of the deaths of J.J. Vallow or Tylee Ryan, obviously, during the time of their death. That didn't happen. All these things are mounting up into excruciating evidence that clearly saw that guilty verdict for Lori Vallow. So whether or not that plays into any effect in the next trial for Chad, obviously the judge is hoping that isn't the case, but it's hard to assume that this verdict that we just saw here won't weigh heavily on this next case. It's likely that we'll even see some references from this case moving forward, Terry and Kara.
Absolutely. Obviously, the jury will be filtered to make sure that they can provide a fair trial to this man who is to be put on trial despite this verdict. And you do point out that it's the Social Security Administration. You heard the grand theft counts in there. The Social Security Administration is the victim of that theft. It's considered Social Security fraud. If you murder someone, don't tell the government about it, and then collect the money. So that's actually grand theft. We do have a statement from the prosecutors, Madison County Prosecuting Attorney Rob Wood and Fremont County Prosecuting Attorney Lindsay Blake. They obviously say they're pleased with the jury's verdict, want to thank the jurors. They say, given the pending case against the co-defendant, we are unable to conduct any additional interviews, so we don't expect to hear from them. But they want to express, again, sincere appreciation to the many members of law enforcement of the community who tirelessly worked together to hold Lori Vallow Daybell accountable. And Chad Daybell's case is up next.
All right, gentlemen, we will continue to, of course, follow the breaking news. Thank you both so much for rolling with us. We've got a lot more news on the other side. We'll be right back.
Whenever news breaks,
the crush of families here in Poland.
Here in Kentucky, no match for the tornado.
From Monterey Park, California, on the ground in Ukraine.
Reporting from Uvalde, Texas.
ABC News Live is right there everywhere.
From the scene of that deadly missile strike in Dnipro, Ukraine.
Reporting from the earthquake in Turkey.
From Charleston, South Carolina, on the 2024 campaign trail.
From Kathmandu, Nepal.
In Truckee, California, covering record snowfall.
Traveling with the president in Mexico City.
Wherever the story,
here at this airport in Tampa, it's already shut down.
Reporting from the nurses on the picket line.
Reporting from Jerusalem.
Here at 10 Downing Street in London.
Streaming live to you.
Wherever the story is.
Wherever the story is.
Wherever the story is, we're going to take you there.
You're streaming
ABC News Live.
ABC News Live.
You're streaming ABC News Live.
ABC News Live. Streaming free everywhere. America's #1 streaming news.
With so much happening these days, it's hard to keep up.
Things change hour by hour, minute by minute.
The historic weather that's now unfolding.
The worries on Wall Street.
We're bringing you the Right Now. Been a nationwide teacher shortage.
The Right Now look at the day ahead. An alert this morning for dog owners and the key takeaways from the biggest stories.
World News Now and America This Morning, America's #1 early morning news.
Today does feel a little different. Early mornings on ABC News Live.
This is where the newsmakers come first in the morning to be heard. America's #1 morning show.
How would your mom feel about your relationship with your brother now?
I can't imagine what it feels like to go from $20 billion to $100,000.
Yeah.
Are you worried about going to jail?
You write that you had low-grade depression. How'd you get out of that?
Wherever the story, ABC's Good Morning America is right there.
Well, thanks for streaming with us. It's a landmark change to the U.S. immigration system. A federal judge in Florida has ordered the Biden administration to temporarily stop the quick release policy, the parole policy at migrant holding facilities, where some migrants are allowed to leave the facility as long as they come back for their hearing. This comes after Title 42 has officially expired, and there is this crisis at the border.
Right, and you can see it in the pictures. Thousands of migrants are trapped along the U.S.-Mexico border now, and our Will Carr is outside that migrant processing center and has more for us on the ground from there. Hey, Will.
Hey there, Kara. We're in downtown Brownsville, where a number of migrants are getting off this bus right now. They have been processed. They're getting off this federal bus, and they are going in to this makeshift welcoming center that is here in Brownsville. Now, after they go into the welcoming center, they'll be allowed out here on the sidewalks, where we have seen people all day. They come in waves off of these buses, and all of these people are waiting to figure out their next move. We've been pointing these out to you, but these blue bags, that means that they've been processed. They have their documentation in there, all of their information. Now, it is a hot, muggy day here. It's supposed to rain at some point, so some people have taken shelter. We've seen them sleeping under the cover of a parking garage here. They are just trying to figure out, like I said, exactly what they're doing next. Brownsville has shut down Adams Street here, which is a main thoroughfare in downtown Brownsville, to try to handle all of this. You can see the fencing set up. Now, most of the people here are trying to get on buses. We are told that some have made their way to the airports. They're going to try to fly to wherever they have family, relatives, friends, wherever they can go and feel that they have a real shot. But most want to get on buses like that yellow bus in the distance. We spoke with one family. They're trying to make their way to New York. They're trying to figure out exactly when they can do that. They have a number of family members. One daughter is 6 months pregnant. She's been sitting out here baking in the sun, and they're hoping that they can get on the next bus that will take them across the country. Kira.
All right, Will Carr for us there in Brownsville, Texas. Thank you so much. He's been doing such a great job just there on the ground, introducing us to the people as they go through getting processed, getting their blue bags, and then trying to figure out how to get on those buses and get to where they want to go. Some of them don't even know where they're going.
Right. That's part of the crisis, of course, and to give us that personal sense has been great. Thanks, Will, for that. Well, now that Title 42 has ended, the Biden administration is going to once again process all migrants who show up at the border the same way they have been processed before the pandemic. That means that authorities will use the normal immigration process as defined by Title 8 of the U.S. Code, which is much different than Title 42 of the U.S. Code. That was a public health act, and that's why first President Trump and then President Biden continued to turn people away on the grounds that it was a public health emergency. That emergency is over. we go back to Title VIII.
Right. So you give the example of Title VIII, right? It has much stricter penalties, such as enforcing 5 or 10-year bans on reentry for those who have been deported. And here to discuss is Senior Advisor for the Immigration and Border Policy Bipartisan Policy Center, Teresa Cardinal Brown. Teresa, we thought it would be great to have you on because a lot of people, they don't understand all the various titles, what they mean, and just the major differences. So let's just start there and lay it out. Biggest differences between Title 42 and Title 8.
So the title just refers to the section of the United States Code, which is how we codify every law that Congress passes. So Title 42 covers all of the laws that Congress has passed related to public health. And Title 8 covers all the laws that Congress has passed regarding immigration and naturalization. The Title 42 order, as we're talking about it, was a Center for Disease Control order published under its public health authority, Title 42, to deny entry to people or goods during a public health emergency. And so under this CDC order, which started in March of 2020 and was continued until today, it essentially was superseded our regular immigration laws. So it allowed our border officials to send back to Mexico or to their home country migrants who arrived without documentation, without processing them under immigration law at all. So these were called expulsions. Under Title VIII, under immigration law, people who arrive without authorization and don't have another means to stay in the United States are deported. That's a formal process that has consequences, immigration consequences. If you're deported, you're not eligible to come back to the United States, as you mentioned, for at least 5 or 10 years. But more importantly, if you're deported and you come back, you could be criminally prosecuted with a felony charge of reentry. So there are more consequences. A Title 42 expulsion didn't carry any of those consequences. And so one of the things we saw was that many migrants would try over and over again to come to the United States while the Title 42 order was in place.
And now, thank you, that was very clear. There is this very considerable risk if you get caught coming into the country unlawfully, you get deported and you try and come back. It's not just we're going to send you back again under the law, and this is the law that was in place before the Title 42 public health emergency was declared. You can go to prison in the United States. So there's an effort to bring some order to the border. But I wonder, Title 42 was so controversial. It was during the pandemic. Why do you think that was? And look, do you think Title VIII is the right approach at this point for the country? Because this is a crisis, what is happening on the American border here.
Well, to your first question, Title 42 was controversial for a number of reasons, one of which was, even though it was issued as a public health authority, even from the early days, it was clearly being used to manage migration at the border. And there's been some news reporting that even officials at the Centers for Disease Control objected to issuing it under the public health authority. And frankly, in recent months, the fact that it was tied to public health was less and less relevant as most of us have gone back to relatively normal lives in a post-COVID environment. So the fact that it was primarily being used to manage migration and not about public health became more clear. The other reason it was controversial is that many of the migrants who were expelled back to countries in very, very bad circumstances. You think of Haiti, which is essentially a failed state, and people were sent back to Haiti where basically gangs run the country. Others may have been sent back to their home countries where they were facing persecution and they didn't have a chance to apply for protection, and so some people were murdered. Even those that were sent back to Mexico faced rampant crime from gangs, from cartels, even from corrupt government officials in Mexico. So they suffered extortions and kidnappings, assaults, even sexual violence there. So those were some of the reasons that the Title 42 order was controversial. And I think the issue about going back to Title 8, in part, is that our current immigration authorities for managing migration at the border were passed more than 2 decades ago, at a time when 90+% of everybody who was encountered was Mexican. They weren't trying to ask for asylum, which many of the people coming in now are, and they could be sent back to Mexico relatively quickly. So there's an increasing mismatch between our existing immigration law and what it says we can do with people who arrive at the border and ask for asylum, and the fact that more and more people are asking for asylum. In fact, most of the majority of people you're seeing in those pictures want to ask for asylum in the United States. A lot of them will not qualify for asylum. They just don't understand the rules, but they have the right to ask for it under our current immigration laws. And I think that's one of the concerns, is that our system just doesn't have the capacity to process that many for asylum and have any timely adjudication on those decisions right now.
Now there's talk that what we're going to see at the border towns on the border is going to be historic, and I'm sure we'll be talking a lot more with you about this. We hope you'll continue to work with us, Teresa, on more interviews and context as we move forward.
Certainly. Happy to.
Thanks. Well, we are going to turn now to that deadly subway chokehold case in New York City. The former Marine who has been accused of killing Jordan Neely in the subway appeared in a Manhattan courtroom today, and he is now officially charged with second-degree manslaughter. He did not enter a plea, maintaining that he never intended to harm Neely. ABC News senior investigative reporter Aaron Katursky joins us now live from outside the Manhattan Criminal Courthouse in New York City, along with our legal contributor and host at the Law and Crime Network, Brian Buckmeyer, again. Aaron, Daniel Penny, that is the man's name. I should have said that earlier. That is Daniel Penny. He is the defendant in this case. No plea entered. Why, and what can you tell us about today's proceedings?
He's charged by criminal complaint, so his case has not yet been before a grand jury, Terry, but the Manhattan District Attorney, Alvin Bragg, said that the victim, Jordan Neely, should still be alive. So the DA's office went ahead and charged Penny with second-degree manslaughter, a charge that reflects the DA's belief that while Penny may not have intended to kill Neely aboard the subway train back on May 1st, he still acted recklessly. The prosecutors were interesting in court, Terry. On one hand, they said that there was evidence from witnesses Neely was scaring passengers and acting in a threatening way, but there was also no indication that he was violent. And so prosecutors, it seems, with this charge, tried to walk something of a fine line because, as you know, the case has roiled New York City and ignited debates about safety in the subway and race and justice, dealing with people suffering from homelessness and mental illness, all brought to the fore in this one case, which is just now beginning its prosecution.
Absolutely. So much social significance in New York City and beyond in this case, given there are mental health issues, there's the rising violence, the sense of it anyway, among many people who live in New York and other cities. And of course, there is the fact pattern here, which is difficult. The question will be, to what degree did the defendant naturally and reasonably assume he was in danger? I want to go to Brian on this one. Before the arraignment, let me first say the attorneys for Jordan Neely's family spoke about the way this has all been handled. Let's listen in.
He is saying that he saw Jordan ball up his fist. And I just want to mention to you this. On May 1st, I'm sure the police questioned him. I'm sure that everybody read the statement that he and his attorneys put out. Was that anywhere in the statement? Was it anywhere? It was not. Daniel Penny is getting a chance to rewrite what happened in the subway that day as time goes by.
So, Brian, that is once again the attorney for the family of the victim saying that it seems as if now the defendant is going to have a story that he saw Jordan Neely ball up his fist. He didn't say that in the statement. That's a kind of prior inconsistent statement, the lawyers would call. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. You're looking at the initial reporting of the defendant to see what he observed, what he thought, especially when you're considering a self-defense claim. And the balling up of the fist is an important fact because, as anyone will tell you when it comes to self-defense, you don't have to wait to be hit before you can defend yourself. So balling up of the fist is a universal sign that you're about to get hit, which would have allowed Daniel Penny to use force. But the question here is, when should force have been stopped? Should he have continued past the point that Neely was passed out?
And Brian, Penny been arraigned on a second-degree manslaughter charge. Initially, police questioned him and let him go. So something changed here. What was it? Was it public pressure, or did they get a closer look at the case and the evidence? What do you think?
I'm going to say all of the above. I'm not going to discredit that public pressure did have some influence in this, but when it comes to a self-defense claim, especially we're probably also arguing defense of others, those in the subway car, I think getting interviews and videos from everyone in the car to see what the level of threat was at the time the chokehold started, as well as when the chokehold ended, and everything in between, help you gather information as to whether or not a self-defense or defense of other claim is valid. I think when they first spoke to the defendant here in the case, Penny, it sounded like self-defense. And then they got more information that says, you know what, we're not quite sure. Maybe we arrest him and let a jury decide, because at the end of the day, self-defense is a fact-driven defense, and facts need to be decided by a jury, not politicians or prosecutors.
Absolutely. So, Aaron, this is going to be a case of major social significance in New York City and around the country. People will watch it very closely. What happens next? Where do we go from here?
Penny is now free on a $100,000 bond, and he will be back in court sometime in mid-July, unless he's back sooner if a grand jury returns some kind of an indictment. But Terry, I think you're spot on, along with Brian, in the duration of this. That video is so disturbing to watch, in part because the chokehold lasts more than 3 minutes, even past the point, prosecutors say, when Neely was no longer responsive. And that's what many activists and protesters have homed in on, and why so much public pressure was brought to bear. Now the district attorney says everyone needs to wait for the process to move forward, because he says Jordan Neely, yes, should be alive. Prosecutors have interviewed witnesses, 911 callers. They've interviewed responding police officers. They've made their charging decision. They hope that brings the temperature down for at least the time being.
And get the evidence before a jury, as Brian was saying. The fact finders are going to determine what happens here as best they can. Aaron and Brian, thanks very much for that. Well, coming up, the Congressional Budget Office says there is, quote, now a significant risk that the U.S. could default on its debt in the first 2 weeks of next month. Oh, great. We're going to tell you where the talks stand right now after a break.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any other newscast. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast across all of television. Right now in America, with so much at stake, thank you for making ABC's This Week America's #1 news and politics show on Sunday mornings.
I feel like the weight of the world is on my shoulders. I've seen a lot. I've been through a lot without ever having a chance to share my side of the story.
Aaron Carter's life story in one sentence.
The drugs, the drinking, everything goes back to tragedy.
I just know I've turned it around, and I've got a lot to say. There's always two sides to every story.
She was extremely beautiful.
Breathtaking.
She's something else.
She was not easy for people, but apparently she was very worth it.
If Elizabeth Taylor was coming of age today, she'd be somebody like Taylor Swift. Elizabeth Taylor is the first influencer. This is who I am. This is what I do.
She liked guys. She liked sex. More power to her.
I have a great passion. I can't do anything halfway. Superstar Elizabeth Taylor. Sunday night at 10, 9 Central on ABC.
From America's #1 news source comes the all-new ABC News app. Breaking news, incredible video, faster, smarter, and it can customize to you and your interests. If you love being in the know, you're gonna love this. Experience what all the buzz is about. Experience the all-new ABC News app. Download it now. We're honored ABC's 2020 winner of 3 Emmy Awards for Excellence. Thank you for making 2020 Friday night's most watched and most honored news magazine.
13 women opened their doors to the man who would end their lives.
Another body in Boston.
A killer held Boston in a state of fear. It was a crime spree that stumped police for years.
Now, journey deep behind the deadly details.
They had hundreds and hundreds of suspects.
And into Truth and Lies, The Boston Strangler, the new true crime podcast series. Listen now wherever you get your podcasts. And watch Boston Strangler, starring Keira Knightley, streaming on Hulu.
The Game Show, Wednesday night.
Life is like a game show. We all are looking for that jackpot.
The chance to win $25,000, $100,000, $1 million.
Love it. What's better than that?
When you give money out on a game show, it's better than sex.
Yes, finally, a show about game shows. You know, a lot of famous people have been on game shows. Wait, is that Meghan Markle?
Welcome to the game show.
Wednesday night on ABC.
You're welcome.
Reporting on Capitol Hill, I'm Devin Dwyer. Wherever the story is, we'll take you there. You're streaming ABC News Live.
Well, thanks for streaming with us. Today, the Congressional Budget Office said there is, quote, a significant risk that the U.S. could default on its debt at some point in the first 2 weeks of June. Lawmakers are up against the clock now to reach a deal on the debt ceiling or risk an unprecedented default. ABC's Jay O'Brien joins us now from Capitol Hill. Jay, where do things stand on these all-important negotiations?
Well, Kevin McCarthy, don't forget, met with President Biden and other congressional leaders in the White House this week. And he said before that meeting he believes there needs to be some kind of an agreement on the debt ceiling by next week in order to make sure it gets through the Congress, because there's a congressional calendar. The president has plans. The president is going to Japan next week. There is limited time to get this done. And as you said, that CBO report indicating the clock is ticking, that there is a chance of default within those first 2 weeks of June, Terry. I spoke with the number 3 Republican in the House, Majority Whip Tom Emmer, and I asked him, is there enough time, even if there is a debt ceiling deal, to get this done? Here is what he told me. If there is a debt ceiling plan, is there enough time in the legislative calendar to get that through Congress right now?
There's always going to be time.
You don't think there needs to be some kind of temporary extension?
A temporary extension is actually a misnomer. That is an extension. Republicans in the House have already provided the solution, because we took the position from day one. We do not believe this country should ever default. So the solution was delivered. If they have something to talk with our speaker that makes sense, I'm sure that we'll hear back, and there's always time.
Is there a plan for if those talks aren't productive?
Pass the bill. We passed the bill. Oh, my goodness. First thing you got to do is get this thing under control. We're spending $1.29 for every dollar we're bringing in right now. Every important fiscal reform that has taken place in this country in the last 30 years has been done through debt ceiling negotiations.
So a little bit to unpack there, Terry. The first being Republicans did raise the debt ceiling without issue multiple times during the Trump administration. So there's one data point there. Another thing is you hear Emmer saying pass the bill. What he's referring to is that debt ceiling bill that House Republicans narrowly passed that raises the debt ceiling but also levels big spending cuts. A lot of those cuts, obviously something the White House is pushing back strongly against. And the White House isn't moving out of their corner here, saying that they do not believe the debt ceiling is something that is worth negotiating over. They say it's too important to be tied to spending cuts. And the House Republican position, as you heard Emma articulate, is that they say they've already raised the debt ceiling with those cuts, and that is the negotiating point that they are going to operate from here going forward, Terry.
Got it. You did raise the point that several times during the presidency of Donald Trump, Republicans were just happy to raise the debt ceiling, and the debt went up under Trump, I believe, $7 trillion. It's more than twice of what it's gone up under Biden, but those are bygones, I guess. We should let them go. So, Jay, Tuesday's high-stakes meeting that you mentioned between President Biden and congressional leaders ended without a deal. Are they going to meet again? How does it feel? Does it feel like we're getting towards something that could avert this catastrophe?
Well, they were supposed to meet today, Terry, as you know, and then that meeting got pushed back. Whether or not that's a positive or negative sign depends on who you ask. Speaker McCarthy said he believes there's going to be a meeting next week. He said that last night, but he also says he doesn't believe there has been substantive progress and it doesn't warrant the principals, the big congressional leaders and the president getting back in a room. So he's not telegraphing much optimism right now. But a source close to these talks tells our chief White House correspondent, Mary Bruce, that the fact that this hearing has been postponed is a positive sign because it shows that the staff who have been working behind the scenes are getting somewhere. They're getting this to a point where they can bring it to their bosses. But we will see next week if there is that meeting that Speaker McCarthy promises may happen, and also if there has been enough headway to get us even further to the goal line here.
Yeah, you know, Jay, that sounds like there's negotiations going on. I thought that the White House position, the president's position, we aren't going to negotiate on this. You know, holding a gun to the world economy and the American economy is no way to negotiate the budget. Sounds like they are, though.
Well, that's the question that I think a lot of people are wondering, myself included, is what are the conversations like behind those closed doors with the congressional staff, with the House Republican staff, with the House Democrat staff, the Senate and the Senate staffers as well, and the White House staffers? What's on the table? Because a lot of the cuts, as you know, that were made in that Republican bill that raises the debt ceiling and also levels those significant spending cuts, a lot of those are non-starters for the White House. Chief among them is rolling back the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act. The White House has said that is not something that they are going to entertain. And to your point, the president has long said that the debt ceiling is not something that is worth negotiating over because it's too important, because it should be raised on its own, because the full faith and credit of the United States hinges upon the raising of the debt ceiling in many ways. Nonetheless, these conversations are still going on. So what is on the table? What are they talking about? That is unclear, and we're hoping to get a better sense of that next week if there is another meeting of those principals. And again, we are on the clock here, not just because of how limiting the congressional calendar is. There are no lawmakers, practically no lawmakers in this building today. They often take off Fridays, and they have some time off in July. The president goes to Japan for the G7 meeting next week. So we are very much on the clock here, Terry.
That's right, and as you point out, he's going to be gone for a week or more in Japan and Australia. I'm going with him, but there is this rumbling that maybe he doesn't go. What about Republicans? Are they softening their stance? Do you see any movement on that side?
Well, the Republican point has been, look at our bill. What we want is in our bill. But to what we said about the White House, the idea that there are conversations going on with staff behind closed doors, we've seen that as a potential sign that there might be some concessions that House Republicans are willing to make. Remember, Senate Republicans have said this is something that they are not going to touch until there is a deal. The deal is to be between President Biden and Speaker McCarthy. That's the position of Senate Republicans like Mitch McConnell. So what House Republicans want is very key here. Are they willing to make some concessions and not cut some of the things that they wanted to cut? But also worth pointing out here, Terry, if there are not some sizable spending cuts in a potential deal, that means that it might not get some of the support of the further right Republicans in the House Republican Conference, the kind that Kevin McCarthy has had to court on big votes over the last few months. And then what does that mean? Does he have to turn to Democrats potentially to pass something if there is a deal that some further right House Republicans don't like? A lot still uncertain in all of these talks.
Absolutely, and it's worth mentioning that the United States is one of the only countries in the world that has such a thing as a debt ceiling. It's a kind of a quirk of our system, and I think it's fair to say no way to run a popsicle stand. Jay O'Brien, thanks very much for that. Always learn something from you there. Well, coming up, the self-proclaimed chief twit, whom Elon Musk is hiring to run Twitter, right after this.
I feel like the weight of the world is on my shoulders. I've seen a lot. I've been through a lot without ever having a chance to share my side of the story.
Aaron Carter's life story in one sentence.
The drugs, the drinking, everything goes back to tragedy.
But just know I've turned it around, and I've got a lot to say. There's always two sides to every story.
Bring them on. If only there was a place in the morning to start my day. With a smile, somewhere to help me get in the know. A place as spectacular as, well, me.
I think we might know a place, right, guys?
Bring your friends. Oh, wait, there is.
Good morning, America.
GMA, 7A, every day. Boom, boom, boom. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Robin. Good morning, America. How are you?
Boom. Now that's how you start your day, people.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it.
Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you?
How cute.
Yes.
So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do?
Hey, I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 2 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any other newscast. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast across all of television.
With so much at stake in our world right now, we wanted to thank you for your trust and for making ABC News America's #1 news.
And thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
The Game Show, Wednesday night.
Life is like a game show. We all are looking for that jackpot.
The chance to win $25,000, $100,000, $1 million.
Love it.
What's better than that?
When you give money out on a game show, it's better than sex.
Yes. Finally, a show about game shows. You know, a lot of famous people have been on game shows. Wait, is that Meghan Markle?
Welcome to the game show.
Wednesday night on ABC.
You're welcome.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. We begin tonight here in Buffalo, London, in Alaska, Uvalde, Kentucky, and Poland, Ukrainian refugees here in Warsaw. Did you ever have a conversation about an abortion? Is she lying? Do you have a political aspiration?
Absolutely.
You ready for this? Go! You're going to deliver a show that will be remembered forever.
Ooh, the pressure on me.
You are just a tough, bad.
And welcome back to ABC News Live. Some other stories we're following at this hour. Country music star Jimmy Allen's record label is reportedly suspending him amid accusations of assault and sexual abuse. Allen's former manager filed a lawsuit yesterday accusing Allen of forcing himself on her several times in 2020 and 2021. In a statement to ABC News, Allen's attorneys say he and his manager had a sexual relationship, but called all claims of abuse false and, quote, extremely damaging. His former management company and its founder have also been named in this lawsuit. Well, Twitter has a new CEO. Elon Musk announced today that Linda Yaccarino, former NBC Universal advertising chief, will now take on the chief role at Twitter. Musk tweeted that Yaccarino will focus primarily on business operations, while he'll focus on product design and technology. Yaccarino will start with the tech company in 6 weeks. And a Mississippi mom will have an extra sweet Mother's Day this year. Haley Lander gave birth to quintuplets in February, and after over 2 months in the hospital, all 5 babies, they're now home. They were born at 28 weeks, which is quite something. They all made it out of the NICU before their May 10th due date. Their mom said she was prepared to spend her first Mother's Day in the hospital, but feels lucky to be home with all her babies. Just wait until they start crawling around. and you'll know what Mother's Day is all about. But congratulations to them, no question about it. They're adorable. Well, on a serious note, it was chaotic and deadly evacuating Afghanistan nearly 2 years ago. It displaced so many locals in that country. It took the lives of U.S. service members and left many remarkable stories of those who helped innocent civilians escape the Taliban. Now, a U.S. diplomat and a woman he helped do just that. They've reunited for the first time since that harrowing evacuation. And best-selling author Mitchell Zuckoff, who was moved by this mission, has now written about it. Our Martha Raddatz with more on The Secret Gate.
This is the last time Sam Aronson and Homera Kaderi saw one another until this day.
I cannot believe it.
It's so great to see you.
Thank you.
It's good to see you, Sivash. There was a bond that I think Homera and I forged for life from this experience.
The experience, a harrowing escape from Afghanistan during the final days of the chaotic U.S. withdrawal. Sam, a Foreign Service officer, breaking all the rules to evacuate as many as possible, using a secret CIA entrance to the airport's runway. Just 1 day after a suicide bomber killed 13 U.S. service members and at least 170 Afghans. One last mission, to save Homera, her son Sivash, and her brother Jaber.
We were worried at that point that anything could be a bomb. We were expecting another attack.
What made you want to walk out there and take that last chance?
I knew that I had something special using this secret gate, that we dubbed Glory Gate. I knew there were risks associated, but I was confident that we had already gotten so many families through this secret entrance that just one more. I just kept telling myself, just one more, and then I'm done.
For Homera, a prominent human rights advocate and author, staying in Afghanistan would have meant facing the Taliban's wrath, a risk she was willing to take, but frightened pleas to leave from 8-year-old Sivash weighed heavily.
But it was hard for me to choose between my way or my son's future. I really love both of them. I wanted to be selfish, but at the same time, I love Sivash and his future, and I wanted to put an end to all of this suffering in my life and also in his life. When I received a call from Sam, it was a light for Sivash. He was happy. I saw that moment in his face.
They raced through Kabul, avoiding gunfire and Taliban checkpoints.
We grabbed them and we ran them back into safety. I was fortunate enough to have body armor on and bulletproof vests, so I wanted to use the protection in that vest to shield Homera and Sivash.
And that last minute when you got through the gate and saw Sam,
Yes.
what was that like?
I really liked his uniform, first of all. It was like, it was a miracle.
When you got on that airplane and Sivash at your side and your brother at your side, what were your last thoughts as you looked down on your country?
How I could leave that country, how I could leave my people. But the light point was Sivash. He was happy. And I know he has his sadness also, but he was happy. He hugged me many times. He told me many times that, Mom, thank you.
There's the Washington Monument.
Their story, now the subject of best-selling author Mitchell Zuckoff's latest book, The Secret Gate.
The story of Sam and Homera is as much as anything about two strangers from different cultures, from different worlds, deciding, I'm going to place my trust in another human being.
What a great story. Martha Raddatz, thanks for that. And before we go, we want to share the latest Twitter sensation. Some kayakers who were enjoying the Chicago River, runs right through downtown, got an unexpected surprise when they came upon Chonkosaurus. If you don't know what that is, you will now.
Look at this guy. Look at his. We got a picture of his most beautiful side. Look at the size of that thing. Oh, my God. That's a massive turtle. Is that a snapper? He's a snapper. Look at that beast. Hey, how you doing, guy? You look good. You look good. I'm real proud of you. You've been eating healthy. You ever heard of liquid salad? We've been doing that. Al does that. I mean, that's a scene if there ever was one, man. Look at that.
Yeah, look at that. Oh, that's my hometown, Chicago. I love it. That clip delighted the Twitter world and has since gone viral. A wildlife biologist has seen a snapping turtle at this size in that river is rare, and the rotund reptile likely just emerged from hibernation. He also said anyone who encounters a turtle of size like this, you should do as the locals did, enjoy the sight, but leave it alone. It's also a sign that the Chicago River, which is when I was growing up, was just almost an open sewer. It was very, very toxic. The Clean Water Act changed that, and now turtles are enjoying it. Don't get too close, though. Thanks for streaming with us. I'm Terry Moran. ABC News Live is here for you anytime with the latest news, context, and analysis, and you can always find ABC News Live on Hulu, on Roku, on the ABC News app, and, of course, on abcnews.com. The news never stops, and we'll be right back.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more